Yes, absolutely. Michael Burr is right. I know it's unpleasant to hear, and I know you're probably, an advocate for Palantir, and you're probably holding Palantir, and you probably really want to hate on me. But before you go there, just give me several minutes of your time and let me show you what it is that I'm seeing, why I'm saying that. In fact, some of you know, some of you don't. About 2 weeks ago, I've made myself a video talking about how Palantir will be dropping to $100 throughout this year. And of course, it's a little bit more complex. In fact, some of us expected the market breakdown to occur last year, and there was some anticipation to see similar prices last year. And so some would be justified to say, well, I mean, it all been said before, and we've already seen Palantir drop around that April drop we had last year, and all sorts of things that happened, and that yet, irregardless, Palantir at the end of the day ends up conquering higher highs. But that is a bit problematic, guys. It's not going to be this way forever, and in fact we are, and we already have seen the end of it, and I was warning and giving warnings about this all along. In fact, if you track down the videos I've been talking about and mentioning Palantir many times, I've said before that Palantir will be dropping. In fact, unfortunately, just to clarify before I get into this, I am expecting Palantir to drop even lower than $100. It's just, it appears to be right now the nearest major checkpoint, sort of station area to which we will be moving, appears to be right now quite a bit sideways, or at least getting locked in, moving within that range for some time, is that $100 range. It does not mean we're going to stay precisely and only within the vicinity of the $100, maybe with a standard or marginal deviation of a couple of dollars. We may actually see movements from all the way to easily 130-ish area, which we will observe in a second, to even below the 100, to 90, 80, maybe even 70, and all the way back to the 100, meaning it's going to be very volatile up and down. But the median, the center core of the price within or around which we're going to be seeing the price revolving around, that would be that $100 range. Okay, now again, that is based on my analysis, and I'll show you exactly what I'm talking about. And some of you even may think that I'm being biased in some way, and because I have a bearish position and all that. No, it has nothing to do with that. In fact, some of you may know Tom Nash, one of the greatest advocates and people who talk about Palantir and highly just advocate and really love Palantir for what they're doing, and talks about their there's of course their stock, just really a big sort of voice behind Palantir. And oftentimes I myself find myself talking to people who have no idea how Palantir works or what do they do. I find myself explaining to people. I really love Palantir, also made money trading Palantir in its earlier stages. Unfortunately, and you have to understand, everything I'm saying has a lot more to do with where we are cyclically in the overall, where the overall market is within its major cycle, and I'll explain how that correlates to Palantir, rather than any issue with Palantir in particular. In fact, looking at the evidence, Palantir will be probably one of those companies who will be breaking down, of course, with the rest of the market, but more of with more of a parachute effect, meaning while the rest will be dropping, let's say 10%, while they'll be falling 10%, for example, in the relative, of course, respected prices, Palantir will be dropping, for example, 7 or 6. Or doesn't have just the point being is that it's not going to be as severe with Palantir as with other assets. Okay, so let's think here. Okay, let me show you what I mean. Well, there are a couple of things I want to show, actually. There is, first of all, this thing, which maybe looks very convoluted and complex and just messy for some people. This is actually the SPX having a variety of various assets and indices superimposed on top of each other, and that way you can actually see that the majority and the vastness of the market actually move in tandem. I know it is very difficult to see, but I really want you to try and sort of squint your eyes hard and focus. Right now, for example, what I'm doing is I'm expanding Palantir in relativity to the rest of the companies. Why am I expanding it? Because, well, right now we're observing things in their arithmetic form. right? In their arithmetic form, meaning adjusted form, adjusted for various inflationary factors, these charts don't really appear as they are, and so certain areas appear to be more flat than what they really are, and by being or appearing in such a way, it's really difficult to see the comparison and comparative to how the price action really behaved like a lot of other assets. So our black line is Palantir, our green line is Nvidia, which by the way, again, very hard to see, but once you expand it, you realize these movements in their own relativity, of course, move kind of in tandem and have the and spikes at the very same areas, valleys at the very same areas, spike again. Basically, although it's not perfectly in tandem, but generally speaking, they move in a singular directional trend together, according to their own crosswinds that they experience throughout, the year, if you will, the months and so on. And so what we really are seeing is that very neat correlation between the vastness of the tech sector, which is technically not all that surprising. We understand most of them are within the very same indices, although something that maybe going to miss about what I'm showing here. Actually, on this chart, we have we have the Nasdaq, first of all, if you can see right there, right, Nasdaq, and it falls in line very neatly with the SPX. For example, if we're going to separate SPX right there and the Nasdaq right there, we're going to grab it, kind of move them together, you will realize they basically move in tandem. You can literally see how they have the very same cyclicality, the very same overall behavior. Okay, the very same highs, the very same drops, of course, again, in their own relative pricing. Another thing, by the way, we can see that, well, the Nasdaq is already curving inwards with a great loss of momentum. We're seeing more of a flat channel on the SPX, but generally speaking, if we pay attention to all these assets, some of whom actually run ahead of others, such as, for example, Microsoft, if we're going to pay attention to Palantir, also falls in line very neatly, but all of them are experiencing, by the way, Palantir itself, if you pay attention, for example, the same way it started rallying and started breaking prematurely to the rest of the market, for example, if we compare the Palantir to the SPX, of course, we can arguably say that we were moving mainly sideways and it's the very same relative high, and only then the valley sort of started happening. But still, pay attention, Palantir started dropping before the rest of the market. Palantir started dropping before the rest of the market. Pay attention. Like, that asset is held by very smart people quite often, and smart people pay attention and notice what's going on, and unsurprisingly so, not because they don't like the company, capitulate because it's not wise to stay within a position that intentionally going to be losing you money. It doesn't make any sense, no logical sense, even if you're an investor. So this message, again, does not go to traders or investors separately. No, it goes to anyone and everyone who's involved and interested in Palantir. And again, I am not a Palantir hater. In fact, I think it's an awesome company. I have nothing against Alex Karp or Peter Thiel. In fact, I know a lot of people hate Peter Thiel. I really think he's quite a smart guy, and oftentimes really misquote him and twist his words, or don't understand the level of thinking that guy is even on, and so they really twist everything around these two guys, both Alex and Peter. And in reality, Palantir is a phenomenal company that all of us who want freedom and a normalized way of life, westernized way of life, if you will, that is sustained partially because companies such as Palantir exist. Okay? So what else we want to cover? Right, let's go to Palantir itself. Of course, Palantir itself is now revolving within a row, a set of various support and resistance levels. You can see how accurately all of them are playing out right now. The ones you can see on the screen, the numbers, of course, right here on the right, the prices rather, the levels themselves. You can see how these levels are tremendously important. Some levels are more important than others. As you can see, there are plenty when it comes to Palantir. In fact, truly, there are plenty when it comes to all other assets as well. It's just it's not that very visible unless you know how to force them out, if you will, right? In this instance, I have placed or allowed as many measuring tools as possible, simply for people to have an idea of the potential levels we might hit, because there are many. So again, we can go over the 1 minute, which is insignificant. Basically, the 1 minute will be showing us barely, you know, the overnight price action and pre-market for tomorrow. So you're not going to see. In fact, you're not going to go that far. You'll not even be able to see pre-market at this stage. 5 minutes does allow you to maybe look into pre-market tomorrow, which now at the moment highlights how we are more than not probable to retrace back to that 136.93, potentially maybe even as far as 138.91. As we can see, there is a nice bounce of bullish momentum right here in the system. If it will persist and we will see similar signs of bullish momentum in the 30 minutes, that will justify that. That kind of shows how we are about to near these near range targets, potentially looking at these various support resistance levels, as you can see, have already been tested and confirmed to be there or acknowledged by the market several times before. So those will not be a mystery, nor abnormal, right? And again, remember, this has nothing to do, what I'm showing has nothing to do with my feelings. It's just, you know, what the market is saying it's going to do, right, given the momentum and directional movement we have already as is. At the same time, we still are having quite this bearish momentum, and arguably looking at the 30 minutes this far more looking into tomorrow than the 5 minutes. So this appears to be a little bit more bearish, but then again, don't forget, this still is in bullish territory, right? As long as it remains above the 50, we still are in bullish territory, so does not negate what would for us would feel like bullish, but in reality it's more so sideways. As you can see, this whole thing is roughly entangled within a center, a very strong center right here, and we can see the price action revolving around this main level, right, until the waves shrink to the point where momentum just dies down, and we will see either the price goes up or the price go down, right? And we'll be able to determine what the price is headed or planning to do, given the longer duration, the longer processes that the market is showing it's doing right now, given our momentum. Our momentum on the 45 minutes, which is kind of a good middle ground between the 30 minutes, between the half hour and the 1 hour time frames. If we're going to look at this appears to be objectively bearish, but about to have a crossover confluence between the K and the D right above the 50. So we're kind of bullish, but are we really? Then again, given if that 45 minutes will converge and we will have that K become dominant, the green line in other words, which does represent mostly bullish momentum, and so it being above the 50 and going bullish, that does highlight the signs that we saw earlier on the smaller time frames, how we may revisit 136.93, maybe even, given how we're looking at 45 minutes at this stage, if we will see confirmation on the 1 hour of a little bit more bullish momentum, we maybe are even talking about these levels, which unceremoniously, uncoincidentally, also match with the median channel. If you pay attention behind, kind of, you can see how that works. Oh shit, I forgot the camera is there, and I'm like, ooh. Hope I'm not confusing you guys. All right, so where were we now? 1 hour. 1 hour is actually opposing. 1 hour is mainly bearish, and right there on the 50 line, right on the border between bearish and bullish. So arguably, I would say this is a lot more bearish than bullish. So this in fact highlights the potentiality of maybe moving towards closing that gap, still remaining of course within the downwards channel on that very respective time frame. We may be looking at this or this. Of course, one does not negate the other. In fact, what we're seeing may play out this way, given that we have to go up and only then we will resume our movement to the downside. I may be wrong about this, and we maybe are looking at this because of that initial movement. We're going to have to move to the upside that we saw potentially. If we're not going to have that full movement and get stuck lower, we have more chances of making it to that lower end, that 125, although it's not certain. If anything, I would have to, if I would have to be a gambling man, I personally would be looking at 130. Again, remember, none of it is financial advice, is merely my own personal analysis. I did work as an account manager at various companies for almost 2 decades at this point. I'm in the industry, so I maybe know what I'm talking about, just a little bit. All right, so let's continue with this. Okay, yeah, moving away from the camera again. I'm being stupid. So 4 hours. 4 hours appears to be very bearish. So in fact, arguably, I would say everything else that we saw in the smaller time frames, in essence, will get engulfed and overpowered by the longer duration. So it is far more bearish than bullish, and I would be very worried. In fact, this highlights not any corrective back and forth. Well, back and forth measure as I've just described, which by the way does seem to be very much in line with a head and shoulders pattern of sorts. This, in fact, arguably, this strength and this interval, I would arguably say that we are looking at that 122, 121 level. Again, I'm not saying all of this will happen tomorrow. Those who don't understand, these things are gradual and don't happen overnight, and there are internal processes there to be had, right? Nothing is linear like that in the market, so I hope you understand that at least. And this is overall general guidance. I'm not trying to tell you when these things will happen, how rapidly, and will it look exactly the way I'm drawing it. More so, I'm pointing out the destinations, the levels, and the overall behavior, how we're going to get there, right? It doesn't mean we're going to go through every single pixel I'm drawing on the chart. I hope everyone who's watching this are intelligent enough to understand this. By the way, this is mainly made for the overall public because my community is very much up to speed when we talk about these things in various meetings throughout the week. I will talk about my community at the end if you want to know. All the links are in the description below as always. I'll be highly grateful for a like and a subscribe. Of course, mainly that thing is good for you. You'll be in the know. You'll be notified whenever I talk about the market and I bring this sort of information to the public, and you'll be up to speed. You're not going to get caught with your pants down, surprised, kind of, not prepared for what's going on. So here's the bigger secret. Now that we zoom out, actually we realize everything we've been talking about is just kind of part of this tinier segment that is now what we're going through, and really we are building up this larger head and shoulders pattern, if you will, that is going on, which I warned about and many didn't want to listen. But here we are, we're doing exactly that, and now we're at basically at the arm line, if you will. Given what we're seeing and what we will see in the following charts, you decide whether it's going to proceed with this or correct. So far we got really low. If you really objectively look at how far we got, we have basically generated a very decent arm, currently putting ours somewhere around here, if you can see, right? In fact, let me just clean all of that stuff up so you can see better what's going on, right? Here we go. Okay, cool. So first of all, what we're seeing here is that we are kind of revolving around that very major level of roughly around 137, 136, right? Again, very same levels we spoke about earlier, but we can see that if we are now on above that 50 range on the stochastic RSI and we're about to have convergence of the forces, will it be all that surprising to expect then the price action to become even more bearish than what it is over the longer duration? Again, looking at the daily chart, so we're probably looking a very nice handful of sessions forward, potentially up to 2 weeks easily. Right now that we are looking at the weekly time frame, in fact, what we realize is a couple of things. Well, first of all, we broke out of the channel, as I warned you all we will end up doing. By the way, very much similar to what we expect the market to behave like, right? Kind of flattening and flattening the curve and then eventually spilling over, becoming more bearish. Very similar to that behavior I predict and spoke about a million times, I think, on my channel. If you're not aware, join the channel, view the other videos, you'll come to understand exactly what I'm talking about and what is the expectation and based upon what. Now, as we see, we are objectively quite bearish and in bearish territory. But it also goes to show that we've been running this for a little bit, and I'm not going to be surprised if we're going to see at some point here hints of that slowing down, at least for some corrective measure. Because again, the same way we say when we move up too fast on the front end of things, on the bullish side of things, that when we move too far too fast, we say too far too fast and expect a corrective measure. Same way here, if we move too far too fast, we expect a corrective measure, which we are potentially seeing some hints on the smaller time frames, or maybe those could be even unrelated, or those could be just so short term that could be unrelated, because this may unfold still within a month or two, may take quite a while until we're going to have some corrective measure that potentially may even bring us as high as that 160 area, given how that is the bottom of the longer duration channel, rather that weekly channel that we're looking at right now. So I'm not going to be surprised at all if we're going to end up entangled right here, moving mostly sideways with steep or in severe volatility of up and down within the framework of this. As you see now, given that we're on the weekly time frame, it is quite a narrow movement on that 1 minute, and because we people feel things on a daily basis, it's going to feel very unpleasant, and people will feel this volatility on a daily basis, and of course that will maybe force some people to capitulate. Maybe some people will think, oh, that's it, that means we found the bottom, we'll start buying in, not realizing there's a lower bottom there to be had. Don't forget, my target currently is roughly around that $100. The actual technical support level there is 106.72, but given how close it is to that 100 level, I can almost certainly assure you, again, I don't want to assure you anything, it's just my own humble opinion, is that when we're going to reach that 106 level, I'm pretty certain we're going to end up revisiting that 100 psychological level, retesting it multiple times, bouncing from that 106 to that 100 level multiple times. In fact, probably breaking even lower than that 100 level many times over. Is just simply the nature of how the price action retests, or rather, again, I wouldn't say the price action, but rather the markets themselves and the market participants through their actions end up forcing the price action to appear as if it's retesting these levels again and again and again. Okay, let's continue. So as we said, weekly bearish on the grand scheme of things, although we are seeing some potential confluence. Now this is scary since we're looking at the monthly, and we do recognize that there is some potential confluence, but the same way with the market right now, that it basically took many months to transition over, or kind of spill over. In fact, it still is within the stages of, which is similarly to what we're seeing here. It is very kind of how to say it, it just has this very weird behavior in that sense that it doesn't have proper convergence. We are seeing a very severe, very steep breakdown, right? We had no retests along the process throughout the breakdown, and so I'm expecting, usually we see some entanglements, we see some slowdowns, rebalancing, corrective measure movements, if you will, impulses. This is a bit weird. This is very aggressive, and almost points out the very similar idea that we said on the front end of things: too far, too fast. In any direction, it's never good. So expect a corrective measure, which again highlights that potentiality of retesting these 150. Of course, right now we're looking at 150 level, but then again, the real level, the strongest level, I would arguably say the stronger levels would be 157 all the way to 164, back and forth, and anything in between them. That would probably the more major levels we will end up testing. Okay, so, and just to conclude kind of the 3 months, this is where the real scary thing sort of shows up. Of course, this is the longer duration cyclicality and momentum as we're seeing it being built up. So this is pretty scary in that sense that it is pretty evident and obvious to anyone and everyone that the bearish momentum is being built up quite rapidly and is very strong, given the directionality of the two forces. They have no hints of just going even parallel to one another. In fact, that they're diverging in this very scary way, emphasizing and amplifying the, again, when someone who understands technicals sees this, they capitulate just out of fear. Them capitulating affects what other people see, and it becomes almost the snowball effect. So one way or another, this is a major sign of the major players around Palantir capitulating within the last several months, or pretty much since the end of 2025, since October, if you can see, amplifying their selling quite rapidly, and that was expected. I actually warned about this happening, and you can see I even said I had made videos last year talking about how this was expected to occur last year. Yes, the market and its own cyclicality dragged processes out, but as you can see, the market is all starting to move downwards. In fact, if you watch my videos, you know I've been saying and warning this very same thing is going to happen with the overall market, and we've been seeing that flattening of the curve, which then in turn will lead up to the larger structure to break down as well. Again, something very similar we just saw in Palantir. Pardon me for all my crazy drawings right there, just to be a little nicer like that. As you can see on the screen right here, the curvature of the trend, and now gone from being very steep moving upwards, now became almost flat. And now that it's almost flat, we can see that the back end is far closer than ever before, and usually the more it's being dragged out, the more the fall, when it does occur, is steeper, instead of if normally would be gradually dropping downwards, similarly to how we climb. In this case, in that instance, instead of dropping a single unit per se every period, we're going to be dropping two measurements, two units of measurement, and basically seeing far more of a steeper correction, which will also eventually will lead up to these very volatile movements to the upside, almost like a bobber being let go underwater, and then it just pardon me, pops back up very rapidly. In that same way, we're going to see the price action behave this way around these processes, up and down, up and down, up and down. But the overall movement, the overall pulling directional movement will still be towards down, basically, towards where we are looking very low. Again, the technical analysis leads us to assess it myself, of course, and I show my community. My community is more than aware. We are looking at 3,300 with regards to the SPX, which in essence we're looking at slightly higher above the 50% correction, which I know sounds insane, but trust me, if you'd know what we're looking at and what we know, you would realize it could be far worse. And in fact, 50% correction is fairly modest relative to how bad it could have been. Unfortunately, as it appears right now, and as the analysis appears, that most of the tech sector will suffer a deeper correction, going lower. And that 50% is merely with regards to the indices. So when the indices drop very low and almost have a flattening of the curve, if these will be, if these will be the indices, we may see some of the assets continue just to establish their own respective bottoms, if you will, while teetering up and down in them. And within these ranges, for example, Palantir's lower range appears to be 30. Again, it is all intertwined. All these things, Palantir, the entire tech sector, of course, pardon me, the major indices, everything is highly intertwined and related. That's it, boys and girls. I think that's all I wanted to say. And so real quick about the community, about the Discord, I do have one spot in my one-on-one academy. If I can brag about it, I'm gonna bring up onto the screen this beautiful thing. You get this, what it says there, and many other perks. I'm not gonna go over them, but one of them, of course, is, you know, learning one-on-one. I'm going to be tutoring you one-on-one how to do proper technical analysis and far deeper tools and far more knowledge than you get on this sort of basic approach we have on a daily basis. You, of course, get to become a member of the community, a lifetime membership. You get to see all the channels. Eventually, once you do go through the academy, then you will be let into the academy portion of the Discord. Let me just bring it up. I will show you exactly what I'm talking about. So that is the Discord. By the way, yes, we do have academy meetings. Then afterwards, when you do finish the academy, those are unrelated to the one-on-one tutoring. Those are just extra meetings I then have with my academy graduates. We have weekly meetings, actually 2 of them right now. Currently, we're running with 2 meetings a week. Of course, there's the academy portion. Those who just want to know and get an idea of how the academy is like, we have here a testimonials channel where my graduates give their reviews and opinions on how the academy was like and all that beautiful stuff, and some other little nice shticks, like we have, of course, the famous Leo 200,000 in a month. And there are many other ones, by the way. We did a plug trade, which was very, very good. People made 300% within a couple of months as well, anywhere between 150 to up to 300% within a single month. Within a single trade, in no time. It was very easy, very awesome. What else do we have on the Discord? Of course, our Patreon sort of section where you have your casual chat, where, of course, you know, we talk about anything and everything, all topics as you choose, as you can imagine. I do post some charts here, just kind of in between, if it's sort of relevant to the topic. We make fun of things, talk about whatever and whenever. Members do get to, of course, discuss and talk as well. We have the Greg's charts, where I post my charts on a daily basis and my analysis, so my members are always up to speed absolutely on a daily basis. My members get an update and understand how I am and what I am following. Greg's portfolio, of course, although there were not a lot of changes, but I'm still holding SQQQ and planning to buy a whole bunch. Still, unfortunately, some spending in my life forced me not to be able to buy as many as I wanted recently. I wish I was able to, but sooner or later I'll be buying even more. Originally, I had 4,000 shares, those who want to know. Now I'm just right under 1,000. Of course, the post board, where we post all sorts of things from memes to breaking news, right? You name it. And many other nice perks that I cannot think of right now. That is it about the Patreon. Of course, do not linger in that limbo area. This area is visible only to those who haven't not yet figured out their members role or how to do that. You have instructions and all that beautiful stuff. That's it, boys and girls. That's all I wanted to say about Palantir and about the community. Definitely join in, because my community is nowhere as surprised by the recent price action and behavior as the rest of the public, because we discuss these things on the daily basis, on the meetings. The regular Patreons also have meetings. Maybe another thing I should have mentioned about Patreon, which I forgot, if I just may, real quick. Currently the Patreon, which if you want to find it, of course, it's you can simply Google Greg space Ori space H, another space, backspace, right? Patreon, and you'll come up with this page. It looks like this. This is the headline. It's kind of a unique name, very easy to spot and identify. You'll come up with this page, and if you'll go to the membership options, you'll realize that this $50 tier, right now, you wouldn't realize that right away, but now let me tell you that this $50 tier is discounted. Why it's discounted? Because next month it's going to be hiked to $70, and the month, well, not next month, but rather at the end of this month. So basically in about 20 days, this $50 tier will become $70. Next month, that very same tier at the end of next month will become $99, where it will stop. Okay, so currently this tier is 50% discounted. This $50 tier is currently 50% discounted. Joining the community, if you lock in that price, you will stay on that price forever as long as you have your subscription. Right? Pretty simple. I think everyone here is aware of how Patreon works like. And then the other tiers are irrelevant, and if you do really want to join the academy, you really will have to go through me first. We'll have to have an interview. I will ask you a bunch of questions. I'll answer your questions, and if you like it, of course, you'll be able to join. I highly warn you right now, I still have one final spot, which I have a couple of people interested in, and if that spot is taken, only then you can sign up by reserving an upcoming spot. Once it gets available, when the student graduates, only then that spot gets available, and you'll be able to join instead of that student, which may at times force you to wait a month, and yeah, you will have to then pay in advance, otherwise you don't reserve a spot. Just that's how things work. So that's it, boys and girls. I definitely highly recommend you join now before the market breaks down again and even further, and then you panic, and then you realize by then all the prices have been hiked, and they are currently discounted for that very reason, so you can enjoy better prices, you know. That's it, boys and girls. This is Palantir. Of course, don't forget, in the community we talk about anything and everything besides Palantir, now including precious metals. In the upcoming days and sessions, I'm planning to make a video about oil. Although I know everyone expects oil to drop even lower, and I know what Trump is talking about, but that's the contradiction. That is the crazy thing that we are seeing on the technical side of things, that if you look at technicals and you know how to analyze and measure, how to use these measuring tools, understand how to quantify the market properly, you can then identify that actually oil, wink wink, let's see if it can bring it up, because it's quite loaded. Yeah, it's quite loaded. Let's see if it can even sort of show it, or it's too loaded and just look like bananas, some crazy shit. Yeah, so it looks like some crazy shit, and that's exactly why I want to do a proper video and just like really break it down without it looking so insane. But if you can see, the point being is this. So I originally said, and it did play out quite well, and we are saying you can kind of see the drawings. I should probably just clean this up a little bit. Like so, maybe? Or I just went too far a little bit? Okay, so if we're gonna look at this, this is kind of the anticipation, and that is not just because I'm biased or something of that sort. You can see the price action and the momentum are pointing towards that themselves, and you're like, well, Greg, that's the monthly. How about the 3 months? Well, the 3 months actually looks even scarier, right? And these cyclicalities do play out over the longer period, because oil in its sort of nature of things, that it is stuck within its range bound. It cannot move out simply because once it goes over certain ranges, already starts affecting profit margins in various companies and various sectors, various markets, and literally destroying the economy. And so it just simply cannot be one of those assets that are exponentially growing over a longer period of time. In fact, it needs to be range bound to keep the economy running. just making cycles within that range, up and down, up and down, up and down, over and over again. So that does actually make it a little bit more predictable than people realize. That's why a lot of experts really like trading oil. It's just very predictable, and even if you didn't get the timing right, usually it just means you need to wait a little bit, and if you got the overall cyclicality and the overall directional trend, you will get it right. I wouldn't say eventually, it just will take a little longer. That's it, boys and girls. This is something I will probably debate in a separate topic, sort of in a separate video. Definitely join the community. Now is the time. I know I said that I'm gonna end this video as I usually do, like 4 times, but it doesn't matter. It does not end until it does not. The video is not over until the fat lady sings, and you know I ain't fat, boys and girls. So just saying. Just saying. And I'm not a lady. Last time I checked, although the long hair, I know, but still not a lady. I promise. I ain't gonna prove that. I promise I ain't a lady though. Promise. That one went overboard real quick. Alright. That's it. I think that's all I wanted to say. Love you all. I'll see you on the next one. And shit, I keep on forgetting the camera is like off, and I'm like, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. That happens. This is not a professional operation, as some other YouTube channels say. Not a professional operation. But definitely, thank you for watching this. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and comment, follow the community, so you will be in the know, unlike the rest of the market that is going to be confused. I'm fucking leaning out of the frame. I was never born to be a movie star, guys. You see, I can't even stay in fucking frame. Love you all.